Hey guys, welcome to this tutorial. In today's episode we're going to have a look at creating a waving flag in Blackmagic's Fusion. Let's have a look first at what we will be creating. So this is an example of a finished composition, a waving EU flag. So before we go into the detailed steps, let's have a look at the basic concept. So we essentially start with a JPEG picture, or whatever picture, right? Any format will work in this program. We will then be adding that to a so-called image plane, which allows it to be placed in 3D space. And then the essential part is really getting it displaced by a Fastnoise pattern. And of course it's an animated pattern over time. And that really makes the flag wave, funnily enough. After we've done that, we'll basically be adding a flagpole. It's a incredibly simple pole here right now. I didn't really add any texture or anything like that, but you can make it as fancy as you would want it to be. And finally, a sky type background and a camera and a simple camera move. So that's what we'll be doing. So let's start with this. So let's create a new composition, right? And we'll start with the flag. Now, just to show you, for this particular tutorial, I created a flag in a program called Affinity Design, but you could make use of any program, Photoshop or whatever, right, and create your design. In this particular case, it's a 3x2 design, and I saved it as a JPEG. So let's take that JPEG into Fusion, right? And let's show that in the first viewport. If you want to show the result of a certain node in a viewport, you can just hit the 1 or 2 key, depending on which viewport you want it to be shown in. So for instance, viewport 1, viewport 2, I want to show this in viewport 2 or in 1 or whatever, right? You can create as many viewports as you would like. You can put them on separate screens and whatever, it will all work the same. In any case, so the first thing we want to do is add a image plane. So I hit Control space to bring up the select tool search bar. So I'll look for image plane. There we go. Let's display that in number 2. Let's move around a bit. So that's looking good. That's the start of our flag. All very exciting. Next thing we want to do is making it, well, displacing it. We'll do that by adding a, funnily enough, a displace node. There you go. And let's add it in and let's have a look at the result. Nothing is happening. And the reason nothing is happening is because there's no input. We want to have something that can displace the plane, right? And for typically that would be a grayscale type map. Now, a perfect way to do this is by using the Fastnoise tool. The Fastnoise tool is basically a Perlin noise-based tool. If you want to look up the specifics around Perlin noise and such, use your good friend Google. For now, we'll just see it as a given, right? So Fastnoise, you can see here a cloudy type pattern. So if we would pump this into this, you can see once we switch on lights that you get a displacement based on this noise map. Now, the first thing I would like to do is ensuring that the aspect ratio of the noise pattern is the same as the image. So the image was 3000 or 2000. Let's just do the same. Right. So this as such is not bad, but it doesn't really look like a flag at all. So the first thing I want to do is really tweak the parameters of the fast noise. So let's go into those. So first thing I want to do is have a look at the scale. Look at this as I tweak it. This already looks more like something that could resemble a waving flag. All right, let's ignore the reflections and such right now, but you know, I hope you can see what I mean here. We can tweak a few of the other parameters to contrast, brightness and such, but for now let's leave it as is and look at the next step. So for a flag to wave, we would need to animate the noise. Now there are multiple ways of doing this. Some people would be looking at this seeth rate. Right, so if we were to do that, there we go. It is doing something. It's moving and looks interesting, but for me it doesn't really look like a waving flag. What I prefer to do in these, well, for these type of cases, is to animate the center of the noise. Right, it would be this. So if we move this around, you can see it moves around as if the wind is coming in from behind, moving the flag around. So that's really what we would like to do. So the way to do this is really, the easiest way is by adding a so-called expression. For those people versed in After Effects, they will be very familiar with expressions. In this case, we want to animate this over time, and we'll use the time parameter. So the time parameter links directly really to the timeline. Again, each frame represents a unit in the timeline. So time 0 is the start of the composition. Frame 1 would be time equals 1, frame 2 equals time equals 2, etc. So if we want to animate that, we could simply say, okay, this would equal time, this would equal time, and that we would move the center point around. But as you will see, this is, well, a bit ridiculous really. It moves way too fast. So we'll need to divide it. Now I can get very fancy about this and introduce other parameters and such, but I'll take the easy route and I'll just divide it by 75 because I tried it before and 75 looks good to me. So if I have a look now, there you go. It's already looking better. Right, it's starting to look a bit like what a waving flag could look like. The one thing you may have noticed is that there's a lot of reflection going on the flag, and really I don't want to have a plastic flag, so I need to tweak the material a bit. All right, and what you want to tweak here is the specular intensity here, dial down, well, almost to 0. As you can see, that already looks a lot better. Right. Now we can tweak the fast noise a lot more, but for the purposes of this tutorial, let's leave it as is. But you can get better results and such by tweaking it a bit more. Now, the next thing would be to add a flagpole. But let's have a look. If we were to add a flagpole, what were to happen? Right, let's have a look here. Flagpole I want to add is at the left hand side. But normally, when a flag is attached to a flagpole, you want that side of the flag to remain stationary. Right, so how do we do this? Because the whole flag is moving because of the noise pattern being animated. So really what we would like to do is basically say, okay, on the left hand side of noise pattern, keep that value, the values there static, as if, you know, the flag is attached to the pole. So how can we do this? Well, it is fairly simple really. what we can do is basically create or utilize a background node, make that a certain color, like a certain grayscale color, sort of, well, medium gray, and merge it in with this so that this part will be gray. And what I didn't mention before is that for this displacement, any white value will really push the pixels out, right? Pushing the flag out, whereas any black or transparent pixels will be pushed to the back. So if we want to have sort of an intermediate value, you can choose just a gray value, and we can just tweak it, and it will all become clear when we start adding it. So let's start doing this. So let's start adding a background node. Right here, it's black right now, and I said I want it to be sort of gray, so we can just tweak it, and let's have a gray one. Then before we do anything else, as with the other things, I want to have the aspect ratio to reflect the aspect ratio of the flag. So I make it 3000 by 2000. There we go. All right. And now I basically want to say, yeah, this is great. I've got this rectangle here, but I just want to use this left-hand side of it. So I'm going to create a mask. Bang, 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 bang. Close the mask. Right. Now this I need to combine with this. So if I have a look here, so these two need to be combined. So what I can do is add a merge node, and you can do it sort of automatically by pumping the output to the output here, and it will create a merge node automatically. Let's show it here. As you can see, the two are combined in this picture. So what will be the result to the displacement? So let's have a look. As you can see, now this remains stationary, the left-hand side, the side where the flagpole will be. Now, the only issue I've got with this is that it's very, very stark. Look at it. Right, and that's not how a flag would behave. So what I want to do is introduce a gradient. Now, the easy way of doing that is basically by introducing a soft edge. You can see it here. It's softening up. And that's already looking a lot better. But I want to show one more thing. For this particular case, this is fine. This would be enough. So if you're bored with me, skip along for half a minute or so. If not, let's have a look at a better method or a more robust method. Let's look at this particular tool here, make double poly. Right, so with this you can basically introduce a soft edge for each separate side of a mask. Right, so if I just click here and pull this to the left, it creates a point. You pull to the left. Similarly, you can do it here. And now all of a sudden we've got a nice smooth edge here just for this side. Again, for this particular example, it doesn't really matter because the remainder, all the other sides are outside of your canvas. But there may be other circumstances where this would be essential. So if we look at the result here, oops, something is going wrong. Don't know what happened there. Let's do it again. There we go. I do know what happened there. Okay, so there's a bit of a stupid mistake here. Masks are animated over time. So if you make a change at a certain point of the timeline, right, the standard setting is that it will start adding keyframes. So let's do this again. Let's delete this mask and just add a new one. We ensure that we're on time 0, right? And we'll add the mask again. Bang, 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 bang. It's not very straight. Let's straighten it up a bit. Here we go. Then this one, and let's pull this in and this in. And I think this looks pretty good, right? What you can notice here though is it looks fairly angular. Now the reason for that is really that we haven't subdivided the image plane by a lot. So by default an image plane is subdivided by 10. So if we look at the wireframe, you can see this. What we want to do is make this a bit more granular, right? So the bends and such, the curve will be smoother. So we can increase the subdivision level, and you see what's happening here. It all looks smoother now. So if we bring that back the normal view, you can see that the movement as such will be smoother. You do, however, see another little problem is sometimes it can lead to some artifacts. Now there is a bit of an art to this, and the art is called tweaking until it looks good. First thing I want to do is put it on high quality, which I hadn't done before. As you can see, it doesn't make an awful lot of difference. Let's increase the subdivision. Doesn't work well. Let's have a look. Probably, well, actually, funnily enough, let's actually keep it at below 40 for now. We may tweak it later. One other thing, when I played this, I noticed that it is a bit unnatural the way it moves, because the way it's attached to the pole is way too much forward. Right, so what I want to do here, as you can see here, the flag is just waving behind it. So I want to pull the left hand side back a bit. Now the way I do that is basically, remember the polygon we made and the background? Let's have a look at the background color. Right, and basically, as I said, if you want things to be moved forward, they need to be whiter. If backward, they need to be darker. Right, so in this particular case, we want to move it, well, backward a bit. So we want to make it a bit darker. So let's do it like this. And there you go. You can see the change it made. And that already looks a lot better. One other setting we haven't touched yet is the actual displacement itself. That really indicates as to how much the image plane is being displaced by the gray values. So if we want to tone it down a bit, just pull it back a bit, and now the flag waving is a lot more gentle. Right. Right, so as I said, you can tweak it a lot more, but for now let's leave it as is. And let's introduce the next element. So the next element we're going to introduce is the pole we spoke about. And that's going to be very simple and very fast. We're going to add another 3D shape. Right? we will need to add that via a merge node. I can either add it manually, or it will be automatically created when I pipe this into this. Oops. And again. And there you can see the merge node. Let's display that. Standard 3D shape is a plane. We want to change that to a cylinder. As you can see here, it's massive. So let's turn down the radius a lot by probably something like this. How big is this? Something like that. Then we need to position it, and you can do this in a very accurate way by looking at the values and everything, but I'm just going to eyeball it. Let's make it a tiny bit bigger. So this seems to be okay, just moving it down a bit. That seems okay, so let's have a look here. Right, that seems to work. Right, let's move the whole thing up a bit. I'm selecting the merge node here and move the whole thing up. And this is really the essence of it. So let's first quickly introduce a camera. And as you can see, the camera is here. And you see it here displayed in the viewport. So I can pull it back. And now the thing you need to be aware of is that right now it shows the perspective in the viewport. If I want to see it from the camera's perspective, I need to switch to the camera, which I just did. And this is the view from the camera. Now, one quick tip from me is navigate in the perspective view. It's really easy to navigate around here with the various modifier keys and such. Keep the Alt key pressed on Windows and then keep the middle mouse button pressed as well. You can just really nicely rotate around. You can use the scroll wheel to go up and down, and then use the control key and then the scroll wheel to zoom in and out and all that type of good stuff. It really allows you to easily position and get a nice angle. And the nice trick here is then, once you've got a nice angle, you can basically say, okay, I've got this angle, I want to copy this angle to the camera. If you then switch to the camera view, then it's messed up. Yeah, sorry, I had a bit of a technical glitch. The reason it wasn't working in terms of copying over the view of the perspective to the actual camera was the following. As you may recall, a bit earlier on, I moved the merge node itself. Right? I wanted to move the flagpole and the flag, both of them together up. And of course it's possible via the merge node and moving the whole thing up, but it messes up perspective view versus the camera. So what I will do is I'll undo that. Right, so I moved it up, so I'll move it back down. Right. What I will then do is basically still select the image, and well, let's do the image first. Sorry, the flag, move that up, and then I disconnected the flagpole accidentally. Move that up as well. And there we go. Pretty much the same result. Now, what I said earlier on will hold. So I find a nice position for the camera. I do, for instance, this one here. And then I basically say, again, copy it over to camera 1. Switch to camera 1. And lo and behold, it actually works, which is nice when you're doing a tutorial. Let's bring in a sky first. So we're going to introduce a new 3D shape. going to attach it to the same merge node and make that into a sphere. Right. What I want to do, what I want to do with this sphere is basically I want it to act as a so-called skybox. So I want to basically project, between inverted commas, the sky onto the inside of the sphere as if it's a real sky. So first thing I want to do is increase the radius of it. Bang, done. And you can, as you can see, we're inside the sphere now. So all I want to do now is project a sky onto it. Right, and that's really easy. Here's one I prepared earlier, the sky. Let's pump that into, the shape. And as you can see, there's now a sky there. There are some issues around seams and such, as you can see here. I do not want to get into that right now. It is fairly easily resolved, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll leave it as is, because the camera movement I'll make will avoid that seam. Now, the one thing you'll notice though is that it is very dark, because it's reacting to the lights, and as a matter of fact, there's no actual light in the scene yet. But for the sky, I don't want it to be affected by any light. So what I basically will do, go back to the shape, go to, lighting, affected by lights, untick that. Bang. All of a sudden it's summer. Right? So, as you can see here, you can move around here. There's a sky underneath. It's all a bit weird, but again, not focusing on that. So really all I want to do here is basically introduce a small camera movement, and then we'll render it out and do a few bits and bobs, and then we're done. So let's start with this. Let's get to the start of the timeline. Let's go to the camera and let's animate things. So we're going to the 3D controls, and I basically animate the hell out of everything. So I right click here and animate the group and animate the rotation. Not this, the rotation group. There we go. So these are all now armed essentially for animation. So if I just move forward into the timeline to whatever, a few seconds in. Oh, sorry, I've got one thing. Going back to frame 0. If I want this to be the starting frame, again, I want then the view of the perspective to be copied over to the camera. As you can see, the values changed here. So if we go to camera, again, this is the view from the camera exactly as it was from the perspective view. Going back to the perspective view, moving forward a few seconds, and then let's move it around a bit. Shall we do? Move in a bit, down a bit, maybe a bit too much. Well, don't want to bore you to death with this, but let's keep it at something like this. Right, and now copy it over again to the camera, switch over to the camera, and then we should have a very simple movement. Yes, like this. Not too shabby. Right, so all we need to do then is render it out. So the first thing we then want to do is add a render node, render 3D. Bang, pump it in there. Want to see the results here. A bit of an issue here. We want to change some of the settings. I'm going to the OpenGL renderer. I want to enable lighting and shadows. But guess what? there's actually no light. So in the merge node, when you view it, Fusion adds sort of a, I suppose, a temporary light to see what it would look like with a light, but it only will start working properly when you add a real light. So what we need to do is add a light to the scene, and it's just really to light the flag itself. As said before, the sky is not going to be lit at all, it's unaffected by it because of the fact that we unticked that. But let's add a light. In this particular case, we go for a simple point light. Let's attach the point light again. As you can see, you need to place the light correctly for things to be affected. Right? I had it at the back of the flag, which is obviously not going to affect the front of the flag. Right? So let's try this again. And now we can see what's happening. Right? And that is starting to look pretty good. Now, before I render it out, I do a few more things. Going back to the rendering node and go into the output channels and ensure that the super sampling is switched on. And I'll show you why. If you zoom in here, as I do here, if you have it switched off, you see the aliasing. Right, and we want to get rid of that by doing that. Right, it looks a lot smoother. Now we're nearly there. All we need to do is basically add a saver node. Saver. There we go. And we need to then specify a path. Oh, let's render it here. Flag tutorial output render dot mov, because I know I'm going to make an mov file out of it at QuickTime. Change the output, well, actually change the QuickTime format for me. Well, changed it to a QuickTime format for me, and all we need to do now is set the end frame as well. Well, we set the animation to at around, I think the last keyframe, well, I don't know, but let's set it to something like 350. End frame here, 350. There we go. And let's have a look at the export. Audio settings, export settings, format, quality, frame rate. I will leave it at the default, compression as well, H.264. Again, not like an editing type format, but it will do for our purposes here right now. And all we need to do now is hit the render button and look at the results in a moment. I'll be right back. All right, this has been rendered out. Let's have a look at the final result. Render. Here we go. So I'd say it's not perfect yet, right? We've got still a bit of an issue here, still too much of a sharp edge, but it can all be remedied fairly easily. But I hope you guys have gotten the idea. If you guys have got any questions, let me know. Right? Any comments, please leave them below. I hope you enjoyed it and see you next time. Thanks very much, guys. Take care.